Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Cramey. I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving weekend and with family and friends. Today, we're going to talk about this two-part series, two separate topics. The first topic, which we're going to cover today, deals with purchase orders and receiving of materials. And then the second topic that we'll cover on Thursday is totally unrelated to today's topic. We're going to talk about using shipping within control. Now, today's session really is only three topics, but it may take us pretty much the full hour. Talking about using purchase orders, we'll be actually creating and using purchase orders, see how they're used. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about what I term the life cycle of purchase orders. They're very similar to the life cycle of estimates or orders, same concept. And then we'll wrap up our discussion today on using Explore to receive items that have been ordered. Now I'm going to change screens here, just one second. Everybody should be seeing control. So let's get started. First of all, purchase orders is an optional feature that has to be activated in order for you to use it. Now, the activation process is very, very simple and straightforward. I'm going to go up to Setup, and then I'm going to come down to System Setup. And on the left-hand side, if we go down to where it reads Purchase Orders, Bills, and Receiving Documents, this is where the feature is turned on. Now, I'm going to get into the edit mode so everybody can see. These two items here are the ones that are relevant to our discussion today. So the check mark has to be placed next to enable purchase orders in order for you to be able to create a PO. If you're going to be using the receiving documents, which we're really not going to be alluding to today directly, then you would put a check mark on it as well. So those I've already activated, so I will save that again. Now, there are some other settings that I just want to quickly draw your attention to, and that's these others that are over here in the first column: purchase orders, bills, next numbers, etc. Just a very, very quick comment on all of those. The default settings that you see probably are sufficient. If you're interested, you can explore around to see what some of the others may or may not do for you. For example, require the order number and stuff like that. So the purchase order settings probably are okay the way they are. The next one down is bills. I think of this primarily in the context if you're using the accounting module, then the ability to create bills, receive bills, pay bills becomes important. For the context of what we're talking about today, bills really isn't a factor. So there's really no need to to change any of those. Next, numbers. Just like orders and just like estimates, purchase orders are also numbered sequentially. So each time you create a purchase order, the PO number is going to increase by 1. So you can see the playing around that I've done. Started at 1, and now I'm up to 10. And the receiving documents started at 1 and right now is at 4. The notes over here on the left, just add notes that may be relevant to you. Probably not anything that you're going to do. Internal notes, same kind of concept. There's really nothing for you to be concerned about in most, if any, of these other settings that are over here on the left. Now, today's focus is independent of the inventory module, and it's independent of the accounting module. There are some things where one is dependent of where what you can do in POs may be dependent upon the inventory module, or may be dependent upon the accounting module. But we're going to keep our discussion so that it's just relative to the creation of purchase orders. So to get started, obviously one of the things that we would need to do is to create a vendor. And you're going to create a vendor in almost the identical fashion that you would create a company. So we're going to go up to New, and then I'm going to choose New Vendor. Now what I'm going to do is walk through some of the more important settings and options, and then we'll actually look at one that I have already created. So just like when you're adding a new company, you're going to type in the name of a new vendor. And then you would likely choose the check name to make sure that it's not already in existence. Notice that when we chose new in vendor, it comes up with a check mark beside the vendor. Now, a vendor can also be a customer of you. You can buy from them, and they can buy from you. And if that's the case, then you would also select them as a prospect. So prospect means that they're going to buy goods from you, and as a vendor, you're going to buy materials from them. Okay? Now, pricing level over here on the right is not relevant if you're using this company just as a vendor. However, if they're going to be both a vendor and a prospect / customer, then the pricing level, promotion, and pricing plan are important, just like they would be for any other customer that you would enter into the database. Now I'm going to take the prospect off. The next two tabs that I want to just quickly comment on, the company tab and the contacts tab, those are absolutely 100% identical to how you would use those two tabs if you were creating a new company. So there's really nothing that I need to comment on, except just to repeat that these two are the same, whether you're doing a vendor or you're doing a prospect or you're doing a company that's both a vendor and a prospect. The one new tab is called vendor. Now on the vendor, we're going to talk a little bit about these various items up here at the top. So let's talk about those first. If this vendor requires a 1099, you would put a check mark there. The payment terms are the payment terms that you agree to for payment to the vendor. So it's the vendor's payment terms. Credit with the vendor. If you're not using the accounting module, that's really not a relevant field, but it would be if there's a credit balance with the vendor. Default shipping is how they're going to ship materials to you. If the vendor has a tax ID number, then that's what you would use here. And if you have been given an account number for that vendor, then that would go in the My Account field. Okay, so these are just the quick ones to go through. Now, when you're creating a vendor, you're going to select parts that you're going to purchase from that vendor. And that's where we're coming down now to this section here, where you see the word parts, and then add and remove and select all and unselect. Okay? I'm going to do one item here to show you the process, and then I'm going to close this particular screen down, and I'm going to open a vendor that I've already created and saved. So the process here is, now you're going to begin to say, what is it that I'm going to purchase from this particular vendor? So over here on in this dialog box that opened up, you can purchase equipment from a vendor, you can purchase labor from the vendor, you can purchase materials, which is probably going to be 95% or more of what you're doing, and all of these other categories. In theory, you can choose and buy from that vendor. Just a concept that to throw out for labor, just as an illustration, if you're going to purchase contract with somebody to do installation work for you, you could set up a vendor for labor that would reflect when you're purchasing labor for some contract work. But generally, it's going to be materials. So I'm going to expand the plus sign. Now, what you're seeing here is exactly what you would see if you were in system setup, pricing setup, and part setup, and then looked at materials. These are all of the different categories of materials. So let's just pick one here. Let's pick laminates. So this is the category, and then a subcategory. Let's say that we're going to look at cold laminates. And this is one of the parts that I'm going to purchase from this vendor. So I would highlight it, and then I would just simply say add. Okay? If I am going to also purchase from that vendor some other material, maybe it's print vinyl, and maybe it is this 10-ounce material, I would just select it and say add. And maybe you're also going to purchase wrap vinyl from them, and I would say add. Okay? Now I'm going to say okay to this. Now you see those three parts over here on the right-hand side. Okay? Or I got my directions wrong. Left-hand side, sorry. This list is referred to as a catalog for this vendor. So we've just created a catalog for this new vendor, and we've indicated that from this vendor, we're generally going to purchase from that catalog. It might be one item out of the catalog, it might be all of the items out of the catalog. So if we start up here at the top, now it brings us up with another set of items. Now I'm going to comment on these other fields here. Okay, if the vendor has a specific part number or as a SKU number, you can enter that there. Under the vendor name, the system control assumed that that part name is the same as the part name in control. But maybe this vendor has a different name that you need to use their name when you purchase this part. So you might just say that it's a vendor catalog. It might have a other descriptive stuff associated with it. Barcode. Now this is important when we get down into here. This is the cost per roll. So it pulls the cost out of the part itself. So this part for vinyl or for laminate is $150 per roll. So the unit cost is $150 per roll. So if we come down and look at this next one, same kind of concept. You can alter put the SKU number in or a part number. You can give the name that the vendor is going to recognize, and the cost per roll of this material is $320, and that's what this shows as the unit cost. Wrap vinyl is going to be very similar. Okay, $345 per roll. Now I'm going to come back to that particular point in a few minutes because there are some things that are really important for you to understand. I'm going to cancel this for now. I'm going to go up and look at a vendor that I have already created. So the company, they're just a vendor, and I'm going to look at the vendors tab. I didn't change anything here. These are the parts that I had previously added. Now let's say that we're going to also purchase some flat stock. Okay, so here I would go up to materials. I would come down to flat stock, and let's pretend that it's going to be acrylic. And that one, and I'm going to add it. All right, now it's added the acrylic, 1/8 inch thick acrylic. This one, it picks the cost of $60 and a penny out of the part that's inside control, and its unit of consumption is sheet, so it's $60 per sheet. Okay. Now, if you want to view, there's two buttons down here at the bottom that I want to quickly talk about. So if we've got this one selected, the acrylic, if you say view part, now you're actually looking at that part as it appears in the pricing setup, part setup for this particular category in this particular material. Okay, that's the part information, the units, cost data, and etc. It's just showing you what that part looks like. Okay. Now, if we do, close that, and if you want to make this vendor a preferred vendor, then you would choose this, make preferred vendor. So after you've created added the vendor and identify the part or parts that you're going to purchase from that vendor, then obviously you're going to save it. Okay, so I'm going to save this with that one part added from what we did. So once we've created a vendor, now we're ready to begin creating a purchase order. But before we do that, I want to just see if there's any questions on anything that we've talked about so far.
No questions as of yet.
All right. All right, so now let's create a purchase order. So again, we're going to come up here to new, and then we're going to say new purchase order. Now we're going to choose the vendor that we're going to be buying from, and let's use that one, okay? You would put in the description that would be meaningful. It's required, so you have to put something there. Now let's look over here to the right. There are some fields that we need to talk about. One is this one called initial status on save. In other words, what is the status that's going to be assigned to this purchase order at the time that you initially create it and save it, okay? And it's called requested. Other choices are approved and ordered. Now think of this in the context of kind of what is the procedure within your company. If you request, if you are permitted to create a request for the purchase of a material, then requested would be appropriate. It's not approved and it's not ordered, okay? So then the next, once you save it as requested, then someone else will come in and review those requested POs, and then they would approve it. But again, it's not ordered at that point. If they approve it later on, then it would be ordered. That actually would trigger the actual purchase of that material from the vendor. So it would likely start as requested. If requested is not necessary, it could begin as approved. And if that's not required, a life of a purchase order could actually begin as ordered, okay? These two fields here, the default order and the line number, you can create a PO and have it associated with a specific order. So you could select any specific order that you want, and even so far as to select a line item within that invoice, that order. You need to be very, very careful. I want to get rid of that here just a second. You need to be very careful in assigning a specific order number. Keep in mind that that order is going to pull into the PO the cost information for a particular part. Now, if you change the quantity that's being ordered, or if you change the cost of that that's being ordered, the order itself will be adjusted to reflect either the quantity or the unit cost. So my message is be extremely cautious in how you would want to use this default for order or the default for line. There may be appropriate times to do that, but just be careful, okay? Now, so to begin to actually add something for a purchase order, I'm going to expand this diamond, okay? Notice the very first entry that's in here that's slightly indented. This is referred to as the catalog for this particular vendor. So if you remember, we initially had 3 items in that catalog. Then we edited the vendor, and I added the acrylic. Okay, so this is the catalog list for this particular vendor. If this is what I want, if I want to order that particular part, I can just double click it. And notice that it comes across as a catalog item with this information. Okay. Here's the cost pulled straight from the part. Its unit of measure is units, or as sheets. So now we can order from the catalog one or more of these catalog items. But there are a lot of other choices in this item type. And let's just quickly talk about some of them. None is self-explanatory. There's just nothing relative that you would, it could be just left blank, okay? A new part. A new part within the purchase order allows you to actually create a part from scratch and save it as a part in control and reference that part in the purchase order. So you would add this new part exactly the same way that you would have had you been going through the pricing setup and a part setup and add in a new part. You put in the part information, the name of it, the category, and other stuff that would be relevant. You would enter the unit business. You would, you do it here, you would enter the tracking costs. So you can create the part within the purchase order, okay? Now, you can also reference the catalog. So you can just say a catalog. This implies that I'm going to get another material out of the catalog. And I would do that by coming over to the item name and choosing what it is that I want. Okay? I can choose a part. Now I can go into the item name, and this gives me this brings me down to the big long list of parts that are in the system. Okay, so you would find one that you would be relevant, and that would be an example of one. Be foam core. It pulls the sheet, the cost information, and the unit information directly from the part. Other item types would be expense. Not likely that you would use it, but you could. Notes just leaves a blank line in here where you can add notes. Okay? So that's primarily what the you can come down to material, you can come down to other labor. All of these have other choices. Generally, my gut would tell me that you're going to be pulling stuff from a catalog. You're going to be pulling a specific part, perhaps, or you're going to create a new part. That would be my gut instinct, is what the pattern that you would normally choose. Now notice that the quantities, this is quantity to be purchased. In this case, it would be the number of sheets. This one would be the number of rolls, and this one would be the number of sheets. So you would enter in the, if you want 10 sheets of that material, it's 10, and the cost is $60 a piece, and then it calculates the total cost. So it says, I want 10 sheets of this acrylic, I want 3 rolls of this material, $345 a piece for a total of $1,000. And I want just 2 sheets of the foam core. So it's calculating the extended cost, the total cost. Now down here in the lower right-hand corner is the total amount that you're contemplating purchasing on this particular purchase order. Okay? Now, I'm going to save this, but I want to come in I didn't put in the date, the expected date. Okay, so now that purchase order is saved. It's purchase order number 10, and it's in requested status. Now I'm going to digress a little bit and go in and look at pricing, setup, all pricing, and I want to look at part setup. And specifically, I want to look at materials, and then I want to look at roll stock. And let's just pick on cut vinyl. Now, some of you in your system, the unit of measure may be that it's square feet, that you're consuming that cut vinyl in square feet. That's what we mean by inventory units. Okay? And it should, and then on the display side, it's length and it's by the foot. It may be square feet. For purposes of the purchase order and communicating to the vendor, you don't want to tell them that I want X feet of this particular material, but I want the unit, I want to tell them I want to purchase a certain number of rolls. That brings us to this particular column out here called additional units. If you're doing this, if you're some of your print vinyl, the consumption is maybe linear feet in your system. Cut vinyl, the consumption might be square feet. Don't alter the inventory units. Don't alter the display units. But you can come over to the additional units and communicate for purposes of the PO what you want, how you want to communicate to that vendor. So if I want to add units, I'm going to just duplicate what I'm doing here. If it's unit type, it might be length, okay? The units might be foot, where 1 foot equals the length of the roll. And that would be an example of how you can have the part consumed, the calculation of consumption be handled one way based on the inventory units and the display units. For purposes of you communicating to the vendor, you want to say, okay, I'm going to purchase X number of rolls, okay? And that's what this item here would have been. I'm going to get rid of this one. I don't want to keep that in the system. So look at the additional units, and it's probably going to be important in the context of cut vinyl for some of you, and for print vinyl for some of you. The sheets should almost guaranteed be okay, and either no matter what system that it is that you're using. I'm just looking at my notes here just a second. Now, one thing that I need to mention, I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to go back to the PO. This is important, okay? Explore purchase orders. Let's take this one that we just created. Now, in this, come on. It pulled the unit cost from the part, okay? If I know that this particular time, maybe they've got a promotion going on and the unit cost is $50, okay? So it's 10 rolls at $50 for $500. The point that I want to make is that the cost originally came from the part, but within the PO, I can change the unit cost either greater than what it was or less than what it was, and that's what will apply to the purchase order. But the change in the unit cost does not impact the cost within the part itself. So for purposes of doing an estimate or doing an order, the original unit cost is going to remain intact, even though for this particular PO, the cost might be different, okay? The SKU stuff here is, I'm just looking through it to see if there's anything else that I want to look at. This would show up if there was a SKU number for that. Now notice here the status. This status applies to each line item, and it started from the fact that the initial status was requested. Now, the status at the line item level within the PO, you can change that. So if and there are other statuses that you can choose, and we're going to talk about how these would be used. But my point here is to simply show you that within the PO itself, you got the overall status of the PO, and then each individual line item can have its own unique status, okay? Just think with me for a second. Let's say that that you created a PO for these 3 items, and one of them the vendor shipped right away, and you got it. So you would want to change the status of the line that you received the material for. So that would be an indication that you would choose the received for that particular item, but not for the other items, okay? So the other choices of statuses is pretty extensive, goes back ordered, vendor told you that they can't deliver it. The bill received is really not relevant unless you're using the accounting module. If you're not using the accounting module, you're using a third-party general ledger like QuickBooks or Peachtree or something like that. The receiving of a bill from a vendor is going to be handled external to control. So you could say that we received the bill, even though it's being handled outside of control. You could still change the status that, hey, we got the bill for this particular item. but it's not necessary. It's not required that you do that. Now, if you had entered in a number up here, an invoice up here, notice that it is referenced here, okay? So this is where you've got to be really careful, because any changes to the cost, to the unit cost, or increases or decreases in the quantity, that's going to potentially affect the actual order itself, and you may not want that to to happen. The override is simply saying that you're overriding. The line is, you can choose a line within within that particular order. So you could have come down to the digital prints, line 2, or you could have chosen digital prints, line 1. Again, be careful, okay? Let's just see if there's other items, other fields that I want to talk about here. Just a second. Let me just take a quick look. Down here at the bottom, chances are you really won't need to change any of those. Just this is, who it's payable to, the shipping address of where it's going to be shipped, what the payment terms were for the vendor, how they're going to send it to you. You can put in a memo number, you could put in a reference number. All of these fields down here are optional. They're not necessarily required. If taxes were going to be, if the vendor is going to charge you taxes, then you would have to enter the taxes from the bill. Chances are, if you're not using the accounting module, chances are you're not going to pay attention to that, okay? And then the total. So once you're done, now you can save the PO. Let me get rid of these. Now I can save it. Okay, so now we've got the items in here. We've ordered these quantities, 10, 13, or 3, and 2. And we're now ready if you could print a purchase order, okay? So if we want to do that, we would come to the print and purchase order. Look at some of the options to see if there are any that you wouldn't want. And then for purposes here, we'll just do a preview and make that a little bit bigger. Shows you your company, the PO number, what the status of it is, the vendor that you're getting items from, and then what you are purchasing from them, okay? This is a PO that you could actually, send to the customer, or to the vendor, defining exactly what it is that that you want. Now, this is again a good place to pause. Any questions on this? Any of this for creating a PO?
Looks like we have one. Let me see. Leah, did you have a question?
Yes. if you order the same material from different vendors, would it in the catalog be each individual vendor's price?
Yes.
Okay.
So for vendor A, if you order the same part, the vendor cost would be that vendor's cost, but it will pull it from the part. It will pull it from the part for whatever is in the in the system for that particular part. It'll pull it from there, but then you could override that and put the vendor's cost in.
Okay, but it wouldn't save it, like, so that way all I gotta do is go to catalog and click on whichever vendor or whatever. It wouldn't save it as two different prices for the part I would go in and enter it.
No, because the catalog is for a vendor. Okay, so you're gonna want those costs to be relevant to that vendor. Now, if you have a part, a unique part in control for that vendor, then it will pull that vendor's part cost. But if you have a generic part that you could purchase from multiple vendors, it's going to pull the generic cost per unit. So you would have to be sensitive within the PO to say, what am I paying for this part from this particular vendor?
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, good.
We have a question from Crystal.
Okay.
Hi, Crystal.
Hi. So on the purchase order screen where you were ordering like 10 rolls of one product, say that we were only going to use 6 of those rolls for a specific job, and you were going to put 4 into inventory. Where you have if you don't put the job number at the top right corner, could you do one line for 6 and one line for 4 and then put that job number still in there in just the one line?
Yeah, we need to be very careful in our discussion today and the use of POs within the context of the inventory module. The discussion that I've had is independent of the inventory. I didn't want that one. I wanted the purchase orders. Let me get what I want here, and then I can get my train of thought right. On this one, come on. There we go. So if you were getting, if you were ordering 10 in total, and in your context, you know that you're going to use 6 out of those 10. My thinking would be that you would create 2 line items, one for 6 and one for the excess.
Right, that was my question. So then on over from the order status, we could put it to that job number just for the 6, and then the other 4 would go into inventory if we had it broke out on 2 lines, right?
Yeah, the actual interaction with the inventory. That is a question that I would strongly encourage you to reach out to one of the consultants on.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit different ball game and stuff going into inventory. Okay. That I'm not equipped to address. Logically, what you described makes sense to me, Crystal. But I would encourage you to reach out to one of the consultants to be sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Crystal.
Okay. I want to talk just without going to any screens and talk about the life cycle of purchase orders. Just purchase orders have statuses and they have a life cycle just exactly the same way that an estimate does and the way an order does. Different kinds of statuses, but it's the same use of that status that it represents where that particular purchase order is in the life cycle of that PO. So a purchase order is going to begin its life probably as requested. The next logical step in the process would be perhaps that it was approved or ordered, either one. It could be canceled if they can't deliver it. So the status is at the initial saving of that PO, it's either going to be requested, it's going to be approved, it's going to be ordered, or it's going to be closed. Those are the four that are represented in the initial creation and saving of a PO. Now, after the initial saving of that PO, now you have additional statuses that become relevant. Within a PO, I am insistent on grabbing the vendor instead of the PO. So here, this could be to change the status of a particular line item that says what's the status of this line item, and you have a different set of choices. So this one could be approved by itself. It could be canceled. It could go straight to ordered, or it could be rejected. Okay. So you have different paths at the overall status level, as well as at the individual line item level. So just think through the path, the processing path with me for a PO. You're going to create it from scratch, just like we did at the beginning of the session, and you're going to save it. It's likely going to start as requested. It could be saved initially as approved, or even as ordered. Okay. After it's been initially saved, then the status could be a change from requested to approved, or from requested to ordered, or requested to canceled. Okay. So after you created the PO and saved it, you're complete the way you want it to be, then obviously that would be sent to the vendor, where you're requesting that material, that set of material based on the PO. So after the vendor gets it, they may respond with a bill. They may respond that says that we're back ordered on certain materials, and we can't fulfill some of them. So the initial communication after the vendor has the PO is you're either going to get a bill, or you're going to get some notification that they can't fulfill one or more of the pieces. Now, you can, within the PO, if you're, again, external to the accounting module, if you're using a third-party QuickBooks or Peachtree or simply accounting, the receipt of the bill, it's not required that you reflect that within the PO. And my logical mind, what I would think, is that I would want to put into the PO that I had received the bill. So in my way of thinking, I would that would be the next step for me. But again, it's optional. You don't have to do that if you're not using the accounting module. Then the next logical step after that is the vendor would start delivering stuff to you. So if they sent it to you, we'd go to change status and say that now notice here before I do that, We initially had quantity of 10. We said that the bill had been received for a quantity of 10. Okay? Now, if we say that we received it, now the quantity ordered was 10. They billed 10. We received 10, and there's nothing additional that's expected. Okay? So we started by creating the PO. We sent it to the vendor. We either got a bill or we started getting the material, and we're going to progressively walk through the individual line items that says where that thing is. It was either the bill was received, then the next step is that it was received, and you could even go straight to, instead of received, you could go straight to closed when you're not using the inventory module, okay? Notice one thing that's critical. You cannot receive partial fulfillment, okay? So if you ordered 10 and only 5 were delivered, you would need to edit the PO and break it into 2 pieces, one for what was received and then the other that would still remain on order. So without the inventory module and perhaps even the accounting, you can't receive anything except what was actually ordered and billed. Okay. So if you got the packing slip from the vendor, you started inspecting things, making sure everything was delivered as it should have been, and then you begin to update the statuses as you're going through. And when you're all done with a particular item, it's closed, and now you're on your way. Okay? So the life cycle begins likely as requested, and it's going to work us all the way through in a series of steps until ultimately the status is going to be closed, where the PO itself is closed. Now, we've talked a little bit already about receiving stuff, okay? And I did that by just saying the status is here. If you're in a fairly sizable shop and you have a receiving department, then it might be important for you to do this convert to receiving document. In essence, it makes a copy of the PO and treats it as a receiving document, so that you're monitoring the receipt of the material through the receiving department rather than the person that created. So there's a lot of stuff in that area that you really need to be. I've done this because I'm not talking in the context of the inventory module. I'm not talking within the context of the accounting module. So I was using the status progression within the order itself and not deliberately using the receiving document. Okay? Now, if all of this had been fulfilled, I could come over to the action bar and say that everything is done. The PO is full. Now, notice that this was closed, but it didn't have the items there, okay? So I would need to come in and say that we got those. None are there. So you still need to do that, but when you're all done, you would close the status of the PO itself, but you can manipulate the statuses here on a line item by line item basis. I'm just looking at my notes. Let's talk a little bit about the purchase orders within the using the Explorer to find POs is very similar to that of estimates and orders. You've got the search criteria and you have filters. Okay, you can say I want to look only at those that are requested, and those are the only ones that I'm interested in. Okay, that's if you're actually using the requested status in that manner. I didn't want that one on. So this says that I'm focusing on the requested items for estimates or for POs this month. Now that's the way I want to look at things. Then I would save that criteria. If I want to look at either requested or approved, then I would select both. The point being that when you're using Explorer, pay attention to the search criteria, pay attention to the filters, and then if you want those as your default, save them. Okay? Now there's one additional one that I need to show you, just to kind of wrap things up, and that is Explorer purchase orders at the item level. Here we're looking at the item number. I'm looking for the PO number as well. Okay, here's the I can't put my fingers on it, but I was looking for the PO number as well as the item number. And the fact that they started with the same low numbers, I can't tell which is which. Let me open that one up. That's PO number 1. There it is. Nope, that's the quantity. This allows you to look at the actual item numbers and do your status changes, that way. I found it just as easy to do it within the within the PO itself. I have covered all of the things that I wanted to cover. Are there any questions on anything today before we wrap up?
We don't have any questions as of right now.
On Thursday, we're going to have a completely unrelated topic. We're going to be talking about shipping, using shipping within control. We're going to look at adding and viewing information on a dashboard, on a shipping dashboard. We may create a dashboard to do that. Then we're going to be using the shipping tab within an order to capture information for different kinds of shipping. Might be everything being shipped in one lump sum to one location, and you can have multiple items sent to different multiple destinations. And then we'll wrap up by just talking about some general kinds of topics and questions that have come up about the shipping module. So I hope today was helpful. and I hope to see all of you back on our discussion on Thursday.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul. Take care.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Have a
Bye.
great day.
Thanks.